Maren Holt's family refused to change their vacation to Maui, even though my son's funeral was that same week. We spent $15,000. That's your problem, not ours, they told me. So I cut off all contact with my parents and my sister. When they returned, a surprise was waiting for them. But I'll start from the beginning. Today I am 38 years old. When everything started, almost a year ago, I was 37. I had been married to Dorian for 15 years. He was 39. He worked at a bank and loved fishing more than anything. Well, almost more than anything, because above everything else were my son Beckett and me. Beckett was 12. He was smart. One of those kids who got good grades without you having to beg him. And he played soccer in a youth league at the community sports center. We lived in a nice house, nothing fancy, but it was ours. For years, Dorian also had an apartment in the city that he inherited from his grandmother. It stayed empty for a long time because we didn't need it. When my sister Larkin married Corbin 2 years ago, things got tight for them. He worked at a car dealership. She was a receptionist at a dental clinic. They didn't earn much and kept moving from room to room or living with roommates. So Dorian and I offered them something. Move into the apartment rent-free. Just take care of it and save up for your own place. I said it sincerely, the way you do in family. Larkin is 3 years younger than me. She had always struggled with relationships, and Corbin seemed like a decent guy. I wanted to believe things were finally falling into place for her. My parents, Vance and Iris, live about 20 minutes away in the northern part of the city too. My dad retired from the postal service. My mom worked for years at the public library and retired last year. They are in their 60s and I thought we got along well. I called them every few days. If my mom needed someone to go with her to the grocery store, there I was. If my dad's hands hurt from arthritis and he couldn't fix something around the house, I went over. When money got complicated, I found ways to help. I really thought that was what family meant. That Saturday in January dawned cold. One of those days when the sun tricks you and the air still cuts. Dorian woke up early, excited to take Beckett fishing at Lake Meridian. They had planned it all week because they said the weather was going to be perfect. They left around 8 inches the morning. Dorian's truck was loaded with their gear, the rods, the cooler with sandwiches I had made, water, fruit, and with the excitement they carried, it looked like they were going to conquer the world. I remember standing at the door watching them drive away and thinking without exaggeration, how lucky I am. I stayed behind doing normal things. I cleaned, did laundry, went to the store. Around 5 I started making dinner, expecting them back any minute. Dorian always said they would be home no later than 6 because Beckett had homework. 6 o'clock came, and nothing. 7 and nothing. I called Dorian and it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual. Around the lake and on some stretches the signal drops. By 8 I was starting to worry, but I told myself maybe they lost track of time or had truck trouble. The doorbell rang at 8:47. I remember exactly because I looked at the clock thinking it was a neighbor or a delivery. I opened the door and there were 2 police officers. Maren Holt? The older one asked with a serious face that froze me. There is a feeling that falls over you when you know, without anyone saying it, that something horrible has happened. I felt it in that second. Yes, I answered, my voice barely there. I'm Officer Ramirez. This is Officer Klein. May we come in? I let them into the living room. My legs were shaking as if they wouldn't hold me. Officer Ramirez sat across from me. The other stayed near the entrance like he was guarding the space. Ramirez took a deep breath. Mrs. Holt, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband and your son were involved in a serious accident this afternoon. The words hit me like a push. Are they okay? Where are they? I asked, and it even made me angry that my voice came out so normal. Ramirez looked down at his notebook. The accident happened around 6:15 this evening on the way back at a traffic light intersection near Riverton. A drunk driver ran the light and hit them on the driver's side. I felt like I wasn't breathing. Just tell me if they're alive, I said, and my voice broke. Ramirez looked at me with a sadness that would never leave him. Your husband died at the scene. I'm so sorry. The world went silent. I heard the words, but they wouldn't sink in. Dorian dead. No, it couldn't be. He had kissed me that morning. He was going to come back and tell me how many fish they caught. Beckett was going to walk in talking a mile a minute. And Beckett, I managed to say, the boy is alive, but he's in critical condition. He has serious injuries, including a traumatic brain injury. Thanks to Dorian's policy, they took him to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. He's in surgery. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I remember Officer Klein drove me in the patrol car because I wasn't in any shape to drive. I remember Officer Ramirez drove my car behind us. I remember lights, hallways, Doctors in scrubs, words I didn't want to understand, traumatic brain injury, induced coma, guarded prognosis. When they finally let me see him, Beckett looked so small truly. He was in that huge bed, surrounded by machines, with tubes, his head bandaged, his face swollen and marked. Dr. Ellison explained calmly that they had relieved the pressure on his brain, but they couldn't know if he would wake up, or when, or how. She was honest without being cold. You appreciate that and hate it at the same time. That night from the hospital, I called my parents. My mom answered on the third ring. "Maren, it's so late. What's wrong?" "Beckett," I said, and I couldn't say more because I broke down crying as if something inside me had shattered. "My love, what happened? Where's Dorian?" I managed. "There was an accident. Dorian, he's gone. Beckett is in a coma." There was silence, a heavy silence that hurts more than any shout. Then my mom said, "No, Maren. Oh no, we're coming right over." But they didn't arrive that moment. They showed up the next morning with tired, strange faces, like they were uncomfortable. My dad hugged me awkwardly. My mom patted my shoulder. They stayed an hour. They asked the basics. How did it happen? What did the doctor say? What happens now? And then they said they had to leave because they needed to make calls. "We'll help you with the arrangements," my mom told me. "Don't worry about anything." I clung to those words like a lifeline. The next day I called them to talk about Dorian's funeral. I was destroyed and still had to make decisions, and that's when I noticed something. My mom's voice was no longer the same. It sounded distant, like she was talking about a chore. "Maren, we won't be able to help with the arrangements." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Larkin and Corbin are moving into Dorian's apartment this week, and we promised to help them settle in." I went blank. "But what does that have to do with anything?" "Mom, Dorian just died. His funeral is more important than helping them settle." "Of course it is," she said quickly, as if wanting to close the subject. "But we already promised, and you know how Larkin gets when plans change. We'll go to the funeral. Don't worry. Just that. We won't be able to help with the organization." I hung up and felt alone in a way I can't explain. My husband had died. My son was between life and death, and my family was worried about boxes, furniture, and not upsetting my sister. I organized Dorian's funeral alone. The funeral home, the flowers, the viewing room, the service, the casket, the cemetery. Every decision I made with my head in pieces while they were helping Larkin and Corbin move into the apartment in the city center. The service was simple. People came. They said nice things about Dorian. I listened and felt like I was watching someone else's movie. We buried him, and when it ended, my parents, Larkin and Corbin, arrived almost at the end. They stayed the minimum and left quickly, and that's when something ugly started to grow in me. It wasn't hate yet. It was like a truth settling in my head that I didn't want to see. After Dorian's death, legally everything was in my name. The house, the apartment, his accounts. Dorian had been careful with money and had a good life insurance policy. It left me stable financially. It was the only good thing in the middle of all that. I work at an accounting firm and decided to cut my hours to part-time. Money was no longer the problem. The only thing that mattered was being with Beckett. The doctor told me that sometimes, even if they don't respond, they can hear. So every day I read to him anything. Books he liked, adventure stories, even the homework the school sent because his teachers were kind and kept sending it in case he woke up. "Your teacher says you're doing great in math," I would tell him with Beckett's hand in mine. "He's saving it all for when you come back." I talked to him about weekend games, what happened at school, funny things I saw on TV. I talked about his dad, told him Dorian would be proud of him, that he was fighting with everything. But Beckett didn't respond. He breathed. His heart was stable. The machines showed numbers I learned to read like a language. And still, nothing. Not a squeeze of the hand, not a look, nothing. The doctors were kind but realistic. Brain injuries this severe rarely have a happy ending. Still, I held on. 6 months passed. My life became a routine. Work in the morning, hospital in the afternoon, nights alone in the house. Larkin and Corbin were settled in the apartment. Sometimes they called to thank me for letting them stay there. But they never asked about Beckett. Never. Not once. Not a "how is he?" or "do you need anything?" My parents visited Beckett exactly 3 times in 6 months. 3. And each visit lasted about 20 minutes before they found an excuse. "Hospitals make me nervous," my mum would say. "Or your dad is tired," she would add. And the traffic, they would finish, as if that justified everything. One Tuesday morning in July, Dr. Ellison called me at work. I was reviewing reports when my phone rang. "Mrs. Holt, "This is Dr. Ellison. I need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible." My heart dropped. I left without thinking. I drove as best I could. When I arrived, the doctor was waiting outside Beckett's room, and her face told me everything before she spoke. "Mrs. Holt, I'm so very sorry. Beckett passed about an hour ago. His body couldn't take any more." I felt a literal blow. I stumbled back and had to grab the wall. "But he was stable," I said, almost protesting. "Yesterday he looked the same as always." "Sometimes with injuries this severe the body gives up," she explained, and her voice broke a little. "There was nothing more we could do. I really am sorry." I went into the room and hugged him one last time. Beckett looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. I hoped he would open his eyes and say, "What happened?" like when he woke from a nightmare. But no, my boy was gone. I drove home and sat in the living room for hours, crying until nothing came out anymore. When I could finally breathe without choking, I picked up the phone and called my parents. "Mom, Beckett died." There was a pause. "Oh, Marin, I'm sorry," my mom said. Her voice was flat, like I had told her the fridge broke. I stayed frozen but continued. "I need help with the funeral," I said. "I can't do this alone again." "Well, that's going to be a problem," she answered, as if talking about a change of plans. "We can't help with that, and we won't be able to go to the funeral either." I thought I had heard wrong. "What? You're not going?" "Tomorrow we fly to Maui with Larkin and Corbin. It's a family trip. We've been planning it for months." It was Tuesday. Beckett had just died, and my mom was talking about a flight the next day. I was speechless for a second, and then my voice came out like a quiet scream. "Mom, my son just died. Your grandson just died. How can you go on vacation?" "We can't move it," she said sharply. "Do you know how much money we spent on this? $15,000. It can't be rescheduled. We'll lose it." I felt my hands burning. They were choosing a vacation over Beckett's funeral. "Marin, you're a strong woman. You'll get through this," she said, as if giving advice. "Just like you did with Dorian's funeral. You don't need us there. And honestly, that money can't be wasted." And she hung up on me. I stared at the phone. Fixed. Like it was something I didn't understand. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I didn't even have time to process it when the phone rang again. It was Larkin. "Marin." "She didn't greet me," Mom told me. "Look, yes, what happened with Beckett is very sad, but we're not canceling the trip." She didn't sound sad. She sounded annoyed. "Larkin, it's Beckett's funeral," I said, and I hated how I sounded like I was asking for a favor. "He's your nephew, and I'm sorry, but that's your problem, not mine," she snapped. And there I really lost my breath. "Besides, I'm pregnant. Do you understand? This might be my last chance to rest before the baby comes. I've been looking forward to this trip for months, and I'm not losing it over this." I was so shocked, no words came out. "You have no right to ask us to cancel," she continued. "We already paid everything. I need this break. You handle your things and leave us alone." And she hung up too. I stayed silent. In 10 minutes my family made it clear that a beach was more important to them than my dead son, that I was alone. But in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Like my head finally settled. "Fine," I told myself. "First I bury my son, then I deal with you." I called my friend Sarah. As soon as she heard my voice, she didn't ask much. She came to my house and sat with me. Together we organized Beckett's funeral. Again I did everything, but this time I no longer expected my family to show up, no longer expected support, didn't even expect them to pretend they cared. Between the paperwork, the funeral home, and finding space at the cemetery, it went until Thursday. The wake and burial of Beckett were that Thursday morning. It was small. It was Sarah and me, some of Dorian's co-workers who remembered Beckett from some gathering, and his teacher, Miss Callahan, who made the trip to be there. My parents sent a wreath. They weren't even capable of delivering it themselves. It arrived with a short printed note, like a transaction. I saw it and felt more anger than comfort. The pastor spoke of the hope that Beckett was with his dad. I tried to hold on to that idea. I didn't cry in the chapel. I had already cried everything at home. At the funeral I felt a strange calm, like I was watching my life from outside. When they lowered Beckett's small casket into the ground next to Dorian's grave, I stood there thinking that my family at that moment was probably checking into a hotel with wristbands, posting photos, laughing and ordering drinks by the pool. After the burial, Sarah said she could stay with me. "Thank you," I answered, "but I need to be alone. I have things to do." And yes, I had things to do. That same day I drove to Dorian's apartment in the city center where Larkin and Corbin lived. I had the keys. It was my apartment. I inherited it, I paid for it, I decided. Before going in, I sat for a minute in the car and wrote a short email to Larkin and Corbin. I told them that from that day the permission to use the apartment was revoked and their things would be stored and delivered. I took a photo of the sent email. I took photos of the door, the meter, the living room. Not for fun, for clarity. I went in and started packing. I didn't break anything, didn't throw anything, didn't make a scene. I simply started. Clothes, shoes, books, documents, dishes, kitchen things, decorations. That horrible lamp Corbin's mom had given them, everything into boxes, bags, whatever I found. I worked in silence with a calm that surprised me. It took me about 3 hours to pack their life. While I did it, I imagined them on the beach with their phones, smiling, as if the world wasn't falling apart on the other side. I called a moving company and paid extra for them to come that same day. Then I drove to my parents' house. I also had keys there, for emergencies. I told the movers to leave everything inside, in the living room, not in the yard, not outside, inside, and to leave it in a pile, boxes and bags on top of each other. As soon as it arrived, I went back to the apartment and called a locksmith. I want to change all the locks, I said, the main one and the security one. Everything. The locksmith did it without asking too many questions. He gave me the new keys. The keys Larkin and Corbin had wouldn't work anymore. Then I went home and turned on the computer. I opened the bank app and started cancelling automatic payments. For years I had been covering things for my family, so many that I had even forgotten some. I cancelled the automatic payment for my parents' car insurance. I stopped paying that supplemental medical insurance I covered because my mom said just in case. I cancelled the Netflix account that was in my name because she never wanted to learn to put her own card, and I stopped the automatic payment I made to her card for groceries. Then I went to Larkin's cell phone plan that I had been paying since she was tight. Gone was the car help I gave her since the wedding because I wanted them to start without so much debt. The gym membership I gave her too. With every change I remembered the reason. Everything piled up. This month was heavy. You earn better. It doesn't cost you. And suddenly I realized something. I had been giving them around $50,000 a month. Every month. Almost 4 years. My phone buzzed with notifications. Larkin was posting photos from Maui on Instagram and Facebook. Larkin and Corbin on the beach, tanned, happy. My parents in a restaurant by the sea, smiling, raising glasses in a toast. Larkin captioned one photo, "Grateful to be here with my beautiful family, the one that always supports me in everything." I stared at that phrase until my eyes burned. I took screenshots of everything, every photo, every caption, not for gossip, because I wanted to remember that exact moment when I understood who they were. 3 days passed. I went to work, came back, ate dinner alone and waited. I knew they would be back soon. And for the first time in months I felt I had control of something. Sunday night my phone started ringing. First my dad, then my mom, then Larkin, then Corbin, then my parents again. I didn't answer. I was in the living room sorting Beckett's things to donate and let the phone ring and ring. Then the voice messages started. My mom's voice tight with anger. "Maren, what did you do? Why are all of Larkin's things here? Call me right now." Larkin almost screaming. "What's wrong with you? We can't get into the apartment and our things are dumped at Mom and Dad's. Call me or I'm reporting it." Corbin trying to sound calm. "Maren, there must be a misunderstanding. Call me so we can fix it." My dad confused. "Daughter, there's a mess here. Please tell us what's going on." I deleted the messages without listening to them fully. Then I blocked their numbers, but they didn't give up. They called from other numbers, sent emails, messages on social media. I blocked those too. Around 10 at night I heard cars pull into the driveway and footsteps, then hard knocks on my door. "Maren, open up!" Larkin shouted from outside. "Open now!" I looked out the window. There they were, all four. My mom, my dad, Larkin and Corbin. They looked tired, angry, and freshly off a flight. They had gone first to the apartment with their suitcases, saw it was closed, and then went to my parents'. At my parents' they found the pile in the living room and then came for me. I took a deep breath. That conversation was going to happen whether I wanted it or not, and I was ready. I opened the door. Larkin tried to push in, but I stood firm in the entrance. My mom came in anyway, as if my house were hers, and the others followed. They stood in my living room looking at me like I had committed a crime. "We need to talk," my mom said, and it didn't even sound like a request. Larkin couldn't hold it. "What were you thinking?" she snapped. "Our things are at Mom and Dad's like trash, and we can't get into the apartment." I looked at her without raising my voice. It's not your apartment anymore. What do you mean? She said, her mouth falling open. I changed the locks, I told her. You don't live there anymore. Larkin went blank for a second, then exploded. You can't do that. We have rights. There was no contract, I answered. It was a favor, a permission, and I withdrew it. Corbin took a nervous step. Marin, I understand you're hurting, truly, but this isn't the way. I looked at him calmly. You could have thought about that before telling me my son's death was my problem, not yours. The silence was heavy. Larkin looked down for a moment. I was upset, she said. Quieter. I didn't say it like that. Yes, you did, I answered. And you also said you needed to rest before the baby came, and that's why Beckett's funeral wasn't worth canceling a trip. My mom jumped in indignantly. Marin, you're exaggerating. We know you're not well, but that doesn't justify doing this. That's not how you treat family. I let out a short, joyless laugh. Family, I said. You're really coming to talk to me about family? My dad raised his hands like he wanted to mediate. Daughter, of course we're family. We've had problems, but this can be fixed. Larkin, who until then was in defense mode, suddenly changed her face, looked at me hard and said in a tone that disgusted me, I get it now. You've taught me a lesson. Fine. So give me the new keys and we'll leave it at that. I looked at her without blinking. No. Larkin froze. What? No, I repeated. My decision is final. You don't live there anymore. Find another place. Larkin put her hands on her belly like it was a shield. I'm pregnant, she yelled. We have nowhere to go. How can you throw out a pregnant woman just like that? I felt a cold tiredness. Did you think about that when you chose Maui instead of saying goodbye to Beckett? Larkin looked at me for a second, and then her face twisted with anger. I know what this is, she said in a hard voice. You're jealous because I'm going to have a baby. And your son died. The living room went silent. Even Corbin stood with his mouth open. Larkin kept going like she was pouring out poison. You've lost your mind since Beckett died, and now you're taking it out on me because I'm pregnant and can move on with my life. You can't stand that I'm happy while you keep crying over a kid who wasn't even that special. Something cold fell in my chest. Then I raised my voice like never before. Get out, I shouted. Get out of my house right now. My mom tried to fix it. Marin, Larkin isn't thinking straight. Neither are you. You're in mourning. You're sensitive and making decisions that will hurt the family forever. It wore off a while ago, I told her. I walked to the door and opened it wide. I'm calmer than I've been in months. And if you really think I've lost my mind, then you shouldn't be here. Leave. My mom paused for a second and then let out what really mattered to her. And the money, she said, unable to stop herself. You can't leave us like this. We count on that help. There was the truth. They didn't come to ask forgiveness. They didn't come to talk about Beckett. They came because I stopped paying them. It's done, I said. The car insurance, the medical coverage, the payments, the card, Netflix, everything. Larkin's plan, her car, her gym, all of it. My mom started to cry, really cry. She didn't cry like that when I told her Beckett died. Marin, please, we can't handle that. We're retired, it doesn't stretch. And I looked at her calmly. You went into debt to go on vacation. You paid with a card on installments. And still you told me my son's funeral was my problem. Now solve it yourselves. My dad tried to speak, but nothing came out. Solve it, I repeated, like you told me. It's your problem. They left. Larkin kept screaming outside that it was unfair, that she was going to get a lawyer, that I would regret it. My mom cried. My dad walked looking at the ground. I closed the door, locked it, and felt something I hadn't felt since before the accident. Lightness, like I had taken a weight off my body. 2 weeks passed quietly. They tried to reach me in 1,000 ways. Messages from unknown numbers, emails, letters, visits. I blocked, deleted, ignored, didn't open the door, didn't answer, until Larkin made a mistake. She posted a long text on Facebook saying I was cruel and vengeful. She said I had thrown my pregnant sister out of her home and left my parents without support just because they went on a trip. She painted herself as the victim. She painted me as someone out of her mind. Her friends started commenting indignantly. Pregnant women need support, one said. What a lack of heart, said another. But then other people started commenting. People who actually knew, known neighbors, people who were at Dorian's funeral, people who knew the story of the accident and the months in the hospital. Beckett's teacher, Miss Callahan, wrote, I was at Beckett's funeral. They weren't. And it was their grandson and nephew that lit the fuse. What do you mean they weren't there? Someone asked. Where were they? asked another, and then people started putting the pieces together. One remembered Larkin posted trip photos. Another said they saw my parents at the airport. Another asked for dates, and suddenly the poor Larkin story didn't hold up. I was reading everything with my heart pounding in my throat. I didn't want to make a spectacle, but I wasn't going to let them paint me as the villain when I had just buried my son. So I wrote one single comment. 1. Larkin, you're right that the family relationship was already damaged. It was damaged when you, Corbin, my mom and my dad chose to go on vacation to Maui instead of attending the funeral of my 2-year-old son. You told me his death was my problem, not yours, and that the trip was more important than saying goodbye to Beckett. I hope Maui was worth it. That was all. The comments exploded. People were horrified. Some apologized for going with the first version. Others confronted Larkin and my parents. Larkin deleted her post a few hours later, but it was too late. The screenshots were already circulating, and not just for gossip, for real outrage. 6 months have passed since then. I haven't spoken to any of them. First, I fixed up the apartment, put it in order, and rented it to a young couple who pay what it's really worth. Leaving it loaned out was no longer an act of love. It was allowing abuse. Then I left my job, not all at once, little by little. And yes, I started traveling, but not to show off, but because Dorian and I always talked about doing it, and there was never time. I went to Oregon, to Charleston, to Santa Fe, to the Olympic Peninsula, to the mountains of Colorado. I went to places where no one knew me, where I could breathe without feeling that everything reminded me of what I lost. I write this from a cafe in a small mountain town in Colorado. Outside it's cool and smells like rain. People walk by with bags, couples talking quietly, normal life, and I, for the first time in a long time, feel I can exist without being in survival mode. When this trip ends, I'm going to move to a mountain place, to a quiet town in the Rockies. I always liked forests and silence, and there's nothing tying me anymore to where I lived. My house has memories in every corner, and I need a new beginning. Sometimes people ask if I miss my family. The honest answer is no. I miss the family I thought I had, the one I thought would hold me when my world ended. But that family didn't exist. The real family, the one that chose a beach instead of the funeral of a child, that one I don't miss. And for the first time in my adult life, I feel free. Free from people who got used to me solving everything. Free from those who confused support with entitlement. Free from those who valued money and comfort above love and loyalty. Free to build a new life with people who actually know what it means to be there when you need it most.